The holidays are upon us. The lame duck Congress comes to a close. As we prepare for a new legislative session, how do we fix the gridlock and the cronyism in our nation's capital? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me on set to discuss, Terry Jones, Associate Editor of Investors Business Daily, and Scott Shackford, Associate Editor at Reason.com. All right, gentlemen, back in 2008, the new President Obama, he had this idea. He was going to come, he was going to change Washington, clean up the wow, too much gin in my cup. Gridlock and the corruption. It's got to be transparent. The system will be reformed. And thank goodness he did that, because now we can go into 2013 with eyes wide open and a spirit of openness in our heart, because he fixed gridlock. So I don't know really why we're doing this segment on gridlock and cronyism. It's really sort of a done thing. But as a historical item, Terry, perhaps you can address the issues of cronyism and gridlock. And what is the root of the problem? Is it, well, I'll let you go. What do you think is going on?
Well, since Obama has fixed it, I'm saying this merely as a matter.
No, just this is all as a historical
matter
of
historical
interest. This is more
interest.
like an archival issue.
Someday, somebody will want to.
Front page. Someday, people might want to know about cronyism and gridlock, and so just in case.
I have a different take on this than many people do. I know historians like to go through the regulatory history and they passed this law that allowed them to spend money and created super PACs, and this law that created PACs, and this law. I look at it a different way. I think bigger government creates corruption and cronyism. Period. And it creates gridlock because the stakes get bigger and bigger and bigger. And once you have a lot of companies potentially feeding at the trough, as you do, for instance, with the green industry right now, the corruption inevitably ensues, and the corruption of politicians inevitably ensues. And I think that's where we are right now. I think we've got 24% of GDP being spent on big government, and the temptations for business and politicians to collude to get a chunk of that are just too great.
So, Tom, do you agree in the sense that there's really no strategy to be applied to this situation other than to shrink government, because, basically government equals corruption, equals cronyism, period?
Yes, the more the government does, the greater the stakes are to manipulate what the government does. And so, we now have people lobbying who weren't lobbying years ago. A bunch of major internet, companies like Google and Amazon, they're organizing together to develop and to lobby the government, and they almost have no choice, because the government, there are the FCC, various organizations who are staring at them and watching what they're doing and looking to regulate what they're doing. And the more the government regulates, the greater the incentive there is for private companies, those big millionaires, those corporations everyone hates. They wouldn't be lobbying the government if the government weren't
stayed out of their business. It sort of links to my next question, because it turns out we saw that this year that Washington, D.C. now tops the list of America's richest cities. That's interesting, because what is the industry of Washington?
Gee, I don't know.
Yeah. Why would people be getting rich in Washington, Terry? Just as a historical footnote, because I'm sure within the next few years, with all this openness that Obama has brought about, and the elimination of gridlock, the per capita income in Washington, D.C. is going to drop. All those people will have nothing to do. So as a historical footnote, what's going on?
I think what's going on, and having once managed our Washington bureau from afar and traveled to Washington quite frequently, I think there's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial spirit there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, new businesses, new business ideas.
Booming,
there's
booming.
a high-tech boom going on there.
Yeah. No, I think it's sad, but you read this statistic here in the recent election that we had in this fall, that 8 of the 10 wealthiest counties went for Obama. And you say, wow. The rich prefer Obama,
well,
and then you find out that 5 of those counties surround Washington, D.C., and it all makes sense.
But the rich do prefer Obama, by and large. I mean, haven't they done a study that said the Democrats, by and large, have more wealth than Republicans? Isn't that, and it goes against the nature of that, those rich conservatives, they want to stick it to the little guy. It's more like the rich Democrats want to continue sticking it to anybody.
Which is funny, because the Republicans spend so much political capital defending the interests of the rich.
What do you think in terms of Washington, D.C. and its aggregation of wealth here? Because clearly Washington is only getting money from somewhere else because it doesn't have any intrinsic industry.
Yeah, federal employees' salaries have gone up significantly, and so they now make more than their private counterparts on the federal level, also typically on the state level and local level. We see a tremendous number of lawyers, based out in D.C. exactly because they're the ones you need if you need to be lobbying the government to control the regulations, to control the lawmaking out there. So because the government's authority is expanding so much, it creates this entire economy surrounding the influence of government.
Now, back in the old days before the Obama first administration, where he fixed all this, we had problems with transparency. There were things that you couldn't understand how government was functioning. You couldn't get access to things. Now, Obama fixed all of that in his first term, incredibly transparent. And so again, just looking back, what can we do to make sure that we continue to have the incredible level of transparency that we do now that Obama fixed it in his first term?
Well, that's a good question because it's so fixed that I don't even. Yeah,
This is one of the biggest points of hypocrisy of his first term.
Yeah.
I mean, he became one of the most elusive in terms of the workings.
And we saw that with the run up to the past election with the Benghazi incidents, where they were not only not transparent, they outright lied about what was going on and talked. They created a shifting narrative for what went on. They didn't reveal to us.
Well, even healthcare legislation that was going to happen under the bright Klieg lights and the transparent walls of C-SPAN.
Well, and they were going to have all bills online within 3 days of them being drafted, and there were a whole slew of things they were going to do and make sure that people knew what was going on in their government, and of course they have not done that.
Anything on the issue of transparency, Tom?
Bloomberg earlier did a little test, and they sent FOI requests to get some basic public information from various federal agencies. And I think only one agency complied. Most of them did not. The rest did not comply. Several of them did not even respond under federal guidelines, where they're supposed to respond between a certain amount of time.
I think we should appoint a transparency czar. Transparency czar, I think, would do it, and he could convene a commission on transparency, and that commission would meet without any clothes on in a public square with helicopters overhead and drones, and then we would have the problem solved. Well, thanks for watching this historical footnote on cronyism and transparency in Washington. That's all the time we have for today. For Terry and Scott, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.